So meet this guy. This guy's name's James Hamilton. He's born and raised in Chile, and this picture is when he was like about 20 years old in the early 80s. So as you know, in Chile, this other guy was running the country, it's Auguste Pinochet, and he's a dictator. And James Hamilton didn't really align with the way this guy saw the world. So instead of joining the revolution, he was a non-violence person because he was a science guy. He decided to do it in a more pacific way, and he joined a Christian church. So this is Parroquia del Bosque, where he joined Acción Católica, a group with like young people trying to change things in a pacific way. Now, here's where he met Fernando Karadima. And Fernando Karadima, it was this priest that was running the church at the time, and he was doing these very inspirational, motivational sermons on Sunday mornings. And he was a very motivational person and inspirational, so imagine the impact speeches like that can have on a young man's mind. And because he was very influential at some point, that's when the sexual abuse started. James at some point said, you wouldn't expect that something like this could happen. It was very confusing. So for a 20-year-old person to be in a situation like that, it was not a nice thing to happen. And then actually, those sexual abuses lasted for more than 10 years, even when he was married and had babies. What's interesting here is like sometime later, a grown-up version of James decided to speak up and got Fernando to be prosecuted. So that was 2010. In 2011, he was deceased from church, and in 2017, he was prosecuted and sent to jail. Now, what's interesting here is that this was a historic event. He was defrocked from church, and I wanted to show you this. So as you can see here, on the gray line, we see the confidence South American people had in church. And if you compare it to the red line, which is the same for a Chilean community, you can see how like around 2010, there's a massive drop. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about Catholic Church? We're talking about sexual abuse? My friends, we're talking about brands. And we were talking about one of the oldest, most powerful brands humankind has ever created. There's even a brand book. Some of you may have read this book. Some others don't. But I guess most of us know what this brand stands for, right? It stands for unity, supporting each other, and being honest. So if nothing has changed over this time, why do we see this drop? Because a brand, it's not what you say, it's what you do. Your brands, my friends, it's not going to be about what you say they are. It's going to be about what you do and then letting users decide what you stand for. So what is a brand? Steve Jobs said, marketing is all about value, so we need to be very clear on what our brands stand for. And then Jeff Bezos said, this one I really like, your brand is what other people say when you're not in the room. So what he's saying is basically we're not in control of what people say. We just need to be able to do things and then let people judge. If you ask me, I say this. A brand is the sum total of all interactions with a business of organization. It's the perception I have, right? It's a promise of what do you stand for. And it's a story about the difference you make, whether that's a negative difference or a positive one. When you know what your brand stands for, you can do things like that. You know, you can build massive buildings, if you have the money, of course. You can build massive buildings and try to showcase yourself as the way you want to be perceived. When these buildings of these cathedrals were built in Europe, that was a time when Catholic Church was running Europe. And they needed to show power. So what is a nice way to show power than creating these massive architectural pieces and then show what you can do? Or this. By the way, the image on the right is not a church. It's Apple's Park Visitor Center in Cupertino. And this is how the building looks like. And this is an Apple store here on the Fifth Avenue, New York. Do you see the similarities here? It's not what you say, it's what you do. Now, let me break brand a little bit for you. So, brand, I want to do this because when I was getting started on branding, there was so much marketing jargon. And for founders, how many people of you are founders here? You have a small business, 1, 2, 3. You're planning. Okay, I see more hands coming up now. Okay, cool. Are you planning on building a business one day? When you get on the business and you start thinking about branding, you go to Google and put branding, you're going to see a lot of different buzzy words come up. So let me break it down very fast for you. And if you want to be a blogger, you want to be an influencer or something like that, please pay attention to this because that's very important. A brand is who you are, and your vision of the world is this difference that you want to make. Now, how do we get there? That's your vision with what you do. Now, what is a brand made of? Let's break it down a little bit. Let's focus on brand. A brand, of course, when we say brand, a lot of people think logo, right? But there's much more to just your identity, which is one part. So part number one would be identity. And this is not just the logo or the visual, the colors, your typeface, your design, the way you talk. This is also your values. What do you stand for? Why do you even exist? And why do you create the products that you do? But there's more. So the product itself or your service, it's also part of your brand. Your capability on on solving someone else's problem, right? And then there's another one, your communication. How do you interact with each other? How do you talk to your customers? How do you support them when they have problems with your products? Now, when you have clarity over all these things, and you have values, and you understand your values, you can take a stand. And then you can take calculated risks, like this one, for example. How many people know this campaign? All right, so yeah, okay, I see more hands. Nike's campaign for the 20th anniversary of the Just Do It original campaign. They decided to use as an image Colin Kaepernick, who is it was at the time a very controversial athlete. And so because it was controversial, the audience was divided. Some people loved him for what he represented. Some people didn't like him. So you can imagine after launching this, something happened. A lot of people were starting to burn Nike's shoes and posting it on YouTube and on the internet. And then this happened. So a lot of people hated Nike for doing this. But this also happened. A lot of people really love Nike for doing this. So when you take a stand, yes, you may lose some people, but you may gain a lot of lovers. You may get people who stand behind you. And that we're talking revenue. And this was the original campaign where there's this old man, like that was 20 years ago, and it was just a commercial, that was an ad, and it would feature this old man like crossing the bridge. It's like, hey, I run 30 miles per day. And it was saying hello, hello. And then at the end, it would finish with like, just do it. And when they did this, look at the revenue that year. It skyrocketed. And they were like, wait a minute, actually, this thing that we've done for one commercial, what if we implement it to the whole thing of our business and all our business, it's about just do it. Boom. This is the power of brand. That's what I'm talking about, not just product. If you have product market fit, yes, you have a solution that fits the user's needs. But then technology has changed everything. We live in a maker culture. People are connected. And there's a new power shift. So the brands don't own the narrative anymore. It's the users. So yes, you can have good product market fit yesterday. But if you want to be future-proof, you need brand market fit. That's what's going to keep you in the long run. The market today wants to be understood. They want to collaborate. They stand for something. They're community, not consumers. And they want meaning. They want purpose. They want to feel they're doing something. And that's what a brand can help you with. Now, this was a form, an online form, 6 years ago, if it was lucky enough to have nice design. And this was Typeform. You see how the difference, instead of having like all these clustered questions, you have one question at a time. It completely changed the experiences. It's more like a conversation, right? So I'm going to show you how we do it at Typeform, because now we understand brand, but how do we actually implement it? When we introduced Typeform, we had great product market fit. We created something different that didn't exist before and that helped you engage with your audiences. But then, of course, when you do something good, a lot of people sees it and catch up. So a lot of companies started replicating the same user interface. By the way, guys, those of you said you have founders, this is going to happen to you. If you have a good idea, if you have a good product, at some point, sooner or later, another company is going to pop up doing exactly the same thing, and you're going to be like, wait a minute. So how do you secure your business? How do you keep it for the long term? That's brand market fit. That's why when we saw this happening, we were like, we need to do something. And that's when we actually redesigned Typeform's brand. We took a step back and we're like, okay, yes, we do online forums that are very beautiful so you get more engagement, but why do we do this on the first place? So we looked at our forums and we're like, okay, the online forums is just a small, tiny part of a bigger picture of all the interactions you have with your customers. So how can we actually, like, what's the story behind this? And the story behind this is that when you're a founder, you have a business, every interaction with your users count. And that's our brand proposition. That's the story we tell. That's why Typeform exists, to help you make interaction with your audience count, even to the tiny little detail, which is online forums. So why do we do this? Because you care about it. And because we care, and that's our core value, that's the thing that connects us. So I'm just going to give you an example on how do we implement this at Typeform. So how do we do this? Now we have a brand proposition, we know our stories, we know our values. How do we actually go to the street and implement this every day? Because that's the tricky part. Because we all do a brainstorming, we can understand our brand stories and figure out what do we stand for, but how do we actually action this? If you're on the process of growing your brand, take notes, because this is what's going to make a difference. I said before, a brand is not what you say, it's what you do. So it doesn't matter that you put content out there just talking, you need to prove it, right? So I'm going to give you now an example on how not to do it. But remember one thing. It's very important that you are consistent at every touch point. So what you do, you repeat it at every single touch point. Don't forget a tiny little piece here and there. You have to be very aware of every interaction you have with your customers. You do it at every touch point, and you do it many times, right? Let's see this example. Imagine I go to the gym, and I want to get a six-pack, right? How many people, wait a minute, how many people actually sign up for the gym the 1st of January? Exactly. So I did it too. So, okay, new year, new feelings, whatever. Oh, you know what? I'm actually going to get a bit hot. So I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to get a six-pack. You go to the gym for a week, and then you go back to the mirror, you look at yourself, you're like, wait a minute, nothing happened. Because these things need time. Getting fit, it's not about intensity, it's about consistency. You have to do it over a repeated amount of time to actually change things. And it's the same for brands. It's not about intensity, it's about consistency.
Product for your customers. Start with conversation. If you want people to come back for more, get to know them. Learn about what they like, what they need, or even how they feel. Really try to understand them, one question at a time. Ready to start the conversation?
All right, capture this. I think we have the logo here. Did you realize on the corner of that commercial that that was the old logo? All right, this commercial cost a lot of money, and we did it 3 years ago. And it's the example on how not to do things. We failed big time. We wanted to establish Typeform as the category lead for conversational data collection. So we said, okay, let's spend a lot of money, put this in front of our target audience, which was people from the Bay Area, and let's see what happens. And then we sit down and took a cup of coffee and waited. Nothing happened. Because I told you, it's not about intensity. It doesn't matter you spend millions of dollars in something and then wait for it to happen. It's much better to split all these efforts across every single interaction and make it consistent. So how do we do it today? I'm going to show you all of the interactions. How do we do it? So I told you, every interaction counts as our brand proposition. So for product, for example, this is how Typeforms were. And now we said, okay, so actually let's make it count. Let's improve design. So we changed the design features. We made it bigger. We improved the interactions. And we launched very recently a new layout. So the Typeforms now, when you're asking for information online, it's more engaging. It's more exciting, right? It's more captivating. And then we include video and things like that. And then we said, wait a minute. So you see, this is how a Typeform looks like. But it's like, okay, these are all text questions. Could we even get rid of this and make it even more personal? Could we actually replace the text interaction for yourself? Could you be the interaction? And so we created online forums with video. So it's called Video Ask, and it's getting a lot of adoption if you want to generate leads or get testimonials, because now you can ask for information in a more personal way, like you would do on the street. In terms of brand, for example, we're like, okay, so we create content. How can we make it count? How can we make it more exciting? And we decided to introduce interaction on storytelling, on video. So we created an interactive short film for Halloween. We launched it, and it was a thriller short film that included our technology, and you could decide what the main character was going to do. This literally skyrocketed our visits, and it went really well. And then in terms of marketing, for example, we try to make it count, but by bringing the user at the center of everything we do. So when we do a campaign, we don't want to say how good we are. I mean, how many of us met someone at a conference like this, and hey, hello, and they start talking about how good their product is, how great they are, how they're going to make the big difference. Just show it to me. Show it. So that's what we try to do. That's why we try to put the user that are doing inspirational things and share it with our customers. For events, for example, this one I really like. So that was like 2 years ago or something when we went to the Next Web and we had a booth there. And we were trying to think, how could we actually make meaningful interactions on an event where there's so many? So we said, okay, could we create like meaningful merchandising, if that can even exist at some point? And what we decided to do was to bring 2 illustrators to our booth to customize T-shirts. So you would come to the booth, and we would ask you, what do you do? What do you like? And they would make a lettering for you on your T-shirt. This very simple, unexpected, expensive thing brought so much people into our booth, but because we were putting them in front of us, and we had conversations, we tried to understand them. And this is the feedback they got. So people here waiting for an hour to get a T-shirt. If you've ever been to a conference, you know how hard this is. This is one of my favorites. So customer service, it's a big one. It's a big opportunity to do branding. It's a big opportunity to show your values on the way you treat people when actually they have a crisis, when they have a problem. So one day we received this message. How to deal with depression. I feel anxious about my sexuality. And so one of the agents replied to that person and kind of like try to connect and say, you know what, I went through something like this, and this is what I did. So 1 week later, we received this message from the same person. Honestly, I talk about depression just because I wanted to see if you guys would even respond. I'm genuinely surprised that such friendly and compassionate people could exist in organizations such as yours. Thank you for responding. I do hope it wasn't a major hassle. Look, I get the goosebumps. This is branding. This is branding. This is what I'm talking about. This is standing for something. This is showing and making your values land and action them. And my last example today, for people operations and HR, we call it home. And in our office, in headquarters, we really like to treat people like people and have really unique and genuine interactions every day. And that's why our reception, it's not just a reception, but it's actually a bar. When you get in, the receptionist or barceptionist, as we call them, will give you coffee every morning. But what's interesting here, it's not the coffee. It's the people who talk to you every day. And that's how we make every interaction count for HR, for example, or the way we do our interviews. We really put a lot of energy in providing great interviews. It's not what you say, it's what you do. So if you really want to create a solid brand, don't just go bragging about how good your product is. Try to show it with every single detail. Brands are like people. I really like to say that most of the time, brands are like people. So no one likes to hear people talking about themselves. Just show. If you're good or honest, just show it, and people will tell for you. If you do it at every touch point many times, and you'll see the impact. I'm just going to wrap now. Remember these things. Brand is not just your identity. It is your identity, but not just your identity. All right? It's also your capability of solving people's problems and your communication. How do you talk with people? How do you interact with them? If you're aware of these things for your organization, your company, you're going to have a lot of power. Because a lot of people ask me, how do I get the most out of my business? How do I get the most out of my brand? Well, if you're only thinking design, that's what you can get. But it's like talking about someone else's, just taking a look at how they dress. There's much more depth to it. And same for brands. If you actually understand the rest, that's all the value you can get. There's so much more uncover you can do with it. Thanks so much.